Hello and welcome back to the channel. My name is Eddie Jennings from EJSLLC.com. This video is going to be another in my RHCE practice session series for the Red Hat Certified Engineer exam. Before I dive in, I want to thank returning subscribers for watching another video, as well as invite anyone who's watching who has not subscribed yet to click that subscribe button and ring the bell when you do, so you can be notified when new content is available. Also, if you enjoy the video, make sure you click like and share with others that might find it useful, and feel free to leave comments. You can either leave questions, critiques, or praise. I accept it all and will respond as I have both time and ability to do so. So this video is continuing my preparation for the RHCE exam, and I want to remind you that it's not intended to be authoritative information, nor is it intended to necessarily be a tutorial. Rather, what I'm going to do is talk about the objective and kind of self-assess whether or not I feel like I'm confident with the objective, and at the end of the video, if I feel like I know what I'm talking about, then I'm probably ready for that part of the exam, and if not, then I know what I need to go back and prepare for, since I have the exam actually exactly 30 days from today is when I will be taking it. So the objectives we're going to get into are in the section of understand core components of Ansible. Now, that being said, if you're preparing for the exam, I would not necessarily start with this particular part of the objectives for the Ansible portion, since, Ansible is the big part of RHCE. What you might want to do is start with maybe configuring the configure Ansible managed nodes section. And the reason why you would want to do that is because that section walks you through what you need for doing your SSH authentication and things such as that. You can of course start with the core components of Ansible, and it's good to know these. But just note, if you are using this video kind of to follow along on some of the stuff that I'm doing, know that I've already set a couple of things up to where things are going to function for examples. And if you're just literally going down the list of objectives as I am, just to make the playlist and such be a bit more organized, that some of these things are going to require a little bit of setup to be able to actually do some examples and practice on. Obviously, you can understand the concepts without needing to set up a lab, but just keep that in mind. So of the objectives under that understand core components of Ansible, we're going to start with inventories. So let's open the terminal, and we're going to go into my Ansible control node. So Eddie admin at lab.rel or -rel, ANCTL is the name of my control node. Log in there. I didn't fat finger the password. It means this will be a good video. So I'm going to SU into my Ansible account, which I've already set up here. And from here, this is where we're going to do all of our Ansible stuff. So the concept of an inventory. An inventory, and this can be one or more files that you're using for this. This tells Ansible, here's everything that you can touch. Now, the inventory, you can have either host names or IP addresses. If you have host names, then you need to have a way of those being resolved either through your etc host file on your control node or via DNS, which I'll be using DNS for my lab. But without this inventory file, then Ansible does not know what it can reach out to touch. And you can have inventory files that are just in whatever directory you have. There is a default inventory file that we'll talk about, and you can also just have a file anywhere and specify to Ansible, hey, use this particular inventory file. So let's start with where the default inventory file is. And if I were to cd, actually I'm going to exit out of my Ansible account because the Ansible account is not a privileged account on this particular server. So let's go into cd etc and go into the Ansible folder within etc. We see we have a host roles, and then we have ansible.cfg. Now take note of this installation was done via repositories. I did not install Ansible from source. So if you do from source, I can't remember off the top of my head if this file, the etc Ansible host, is going to exist or not. It's been a while since I've tried to install from GitHub for that. So bear in mind, if you don't install from the repository, this might be a little bit different. But this etc Ansible host, this is our default host file. So if I were to cat hosts, And what it has for you, actually, rather than cat, let me clear the screen, which by the way, I'm going to use a little shortcut, Control L. I had some user feedback. Let me see if I can find that real quick. No, that's a little bit outside of the scope of what we're doing, but if I get some good suggestions, I like to thank folks for those suggestions. Let me find that real quick. So I want to thank Greg M., who gave a comment on one of my other RHCE videos about being able to use Control L rather than clear. So Greg, you're awesome. Thank you for that. That's going to save some time in videos such as this one here. So the Etsy hosts, or Etsy Ansible hosts, this file itself is going to be most useful for you, I think, for your exam. It comes with examples of a variety of things, and these examples are all in the INI format. We're going to talk about the YAML format with this as well. But the couple things to take note of with this is, again, you can list hosts either by IP address, you can list them by their name as well, or fully qualified domain name. The nice thing about this is you can do something such as this. Notice this www.001:006. This stands for a fully qualified domain name. That would be www.001.example.com, www.002.example.com, on and on and on through 6. So it keeps you from having to do individual lines for things as well. The other thing to note with this is the little brackets here where it has DB servers and web servers. These refer to host groups, to where when you're doing your playbooks or doing Ansible ad hoc commands, rather than having to specify your individual hosts, let's say that you want to do something that just affects your web servers. Well, if you have a group defined in your inventory file, then you can simply call that group rather than having to do the individual hosts. Let's see anything else here. Now, this by default is where Ansible is going to look for your inventory. And we know this because if we were to take a look at the ansible.cfg config file, and we look at the default values here, by default, inventory is going to be Etsy Ansible host. Of course, you can change this default value if you wish. Also, what you can do, and this gets a little bit outside the scope of this particular thing, but you can have configuration files in other places other than just Etsy Ansible config. And when we get to configuration, we'll talk about the precedence of those files. And in those configuration files, you can dictate where you want your inventory to be. So, for example, let's go back to our Ansible user. So sudo su-l ansible. Put in my password. All right, we have nothing in here. So what I'm going to do is just create a file. We're going to call this inventory. So simple text file. And I'm going to list the hosts that I have in my little Ansible lab. So if I would just do lab rel an01, lab rel an02, and I have all the way up to 4 with this. All right, so I have my inventory, cat inventory. Now, a way to check your inventory file to see if Ansible can probably understand it is to use the Ansible inventory command. So if I were to do Ansible-inventory, and I'm going to use the --graph command, and I'm going to, I think -I need to give that to tell it the inventory file to use. Tell it the name of the file. And notice it says we have all and ungrouped, and we have this file here. Now, if you had something weird in your inventory, then this command is probably not going to work well for you. So therefore, you can use that kind of as a check. Now, I'm curious to see if I don't do --graph, if it will function. I don't think so, but let's see. Yeah, it tells you that you need to have some more stuff, such as new list, which will give you all of the host, but the format that host is going to be is if you were doing like dynamic inventories, and the idea behind that is Rather than have static entries like this, you would be using a script to generate items for the inventory as you need. I know that is outside the scope of RHCE, so I'm not going to go into it on this video. Plus, it's something that I haven't learned how to do yet. So obviously I can't do much of a practice session on something I haven't learned. So we have our inventory file. Let me clear the screen here, and I'm just going to run a quick little command. It's going to be Ansible ad hoc command, Ansible. I'm going to say all. All is a special group in an inventory that refers to every host that you have in that. Now, if I were to do Ansible all, I'm going to do the ping module -m for ping, and let's see what happens here. Now it's complaining that the provided host list is empty. Only localhost is available. Note that implicit localhost does not match all. Well, let's think. We have an inventory file, but it thinks that it's empty. That's because by default, Ansible is going to be looking at that etc Ansible host file for an inventory. So since we're not using the default inventory, we have to do the -i command and tell it the file that we want it to use. And in this case, we're going to do inventory. I'll use tab completion there. Let's see what happens this time. And here we have successes. It was able to successfully ping each of the Ansible servers that I have in the inventory. Let's go back into the inventory and let's say that we wanted to make some groups out of these. So we have our 4 servers, and let's say that server 1 and server 2 were, well, we'll use the example from the etc Ansible host file, and they are web servers. So I'll do lab rel, and I'm going to use the shorthand this time of not really saving you much, but it saves a line 1:2. And let's say 3 and 4 are the database servers or DB servers. Again, we'll use the shorthand for that. We'll save the file, and let's clear our screen. Use my newly learned shortcut, Control L for that. And let's do the ping module again, but we're going to do this against just the database servers. So I'll say Ansible DB servers and module ping. And let's see what happens. I forgot to specify the inventory file. So this should work. Of course, famous last words in IT, should, and it does. Obviously both of the hosts will ping back to us. Now you can have groups nested in groups, and let's see if I can remember the syntax for that. So let's go back into our inventory file. And let's make a couple of changes here. So we're going to say web servers, even though that name is plural, is just host 1. And let's say database servers, just 2. Let's say that we want to do a group called prod servers. Now let's see if I can remember how this should be. Or actually, well, yeah, let me put this to the test first, and then I'll check against documentation. So I would have prod servers, and I think I just have to list the server name. Let's see what happens. So let's do Ansible Inventory. I like the -- graph option. All right, so it read that. That's curious. Found both group and hosts the same name. Yeah, that's going to be a problem. I don't have the syntax right for that. So how? I think I have to do colons for that. All right, let's go back in inventory. Let me try this, and then we'll start checking documentation. So prod servers. Now I think I remember colon, and that's going to include web servers and DB servers. Let's see if that makes it happier. Hopefully it will. Nope, didn't like that. Dictionary. Okay, so let's say you're doing this on the exam and you get stuck and it says make an inventory file in INI format, and the INI format needs to include a group that has another group nested in it. So I'd say the first place to look for documentation is to just look at that default groups folder or default inventory, because that will give you some clues. So let's cat that. etc Ansible hosts. Should be able to cat that. All right, has that multiple hosts, pattern you specify, host ranges. I know you can do nested hosts. Hosts limited by. All right. So let us look. I think there is a command in Ansible doc that can help us too. Yeah, type inventory list. So Ansible doc t inventory. So go type inventory -L for list. All right. So this is what it has found with inventory. Let's see if there's anything that will help us with this. Now, being able to use the documentation, as I've said in other videos, is key. You need to know how to do that. So, use ini as inventory source. So let's see what happens. So we're going to do Ansible doc -t inventory ini. That should give us what we need. Okay. So let's skim through this. Okay. That's it. So I need to do web::children. All right. And the reason why that makes sense when you use a YAML formatted thing, you have the word children with that. And so that would make sense for the ini file as well. So vi inventory, let's see, prod servers, we'll change this to children. And web servers, DB servers. Let's see if it likes that more. So Ansible inventory --graph and our inventory file. That's a happier inventory file, because notice how it shows us our prod servers is made up of DB servers and web servers, which is each of those are made up of those two particular hosts. So we can do, let's go back to our ping module. So now we can do Ansible prod servers in ping. I keep forgetting to tell it the inventory file. That should give us 1 and 2. We can now do, let's do Ansible ungrouped, because this should have 3 and 4. And it does. Of course, you can do Ansible all, which will do everything. And then you also can just do individual hosts as well. We've been working with groups. We can also do lab rel an01, and it will just work against that one thing. So the other thing I wanted to show you was basically doing the same thing but using YAML format. And I've talked to just a couple of colleagues and such of mine, and you know, it's kind of neat. A lot of the training material that I've used for my preparation for RHCE generally has inventory files as ini files. Yet some of the colleagues that I've talked to that use Ansible a good bit, I've kind of picked their brains as I've been learning stuff, are like, oh, we like using YAML because it's a little bit easier to read. All right, and then I look at some of the Fedora project stuff, and I've looked at some of their Ansible, and it looks like that a lot of their inventories are in ini format. So, you know, I don't think there's really necessarily a quote right answer to should you use ini, should you use YAML. The default Ansible inventory that Etsy Ansible hosts is in ini, and so I would say for the exam, if you have to pick, or if you have the option to pick whichever is easier for you to use, unless obviously it specifies make an inventory in whatever format. So to do this in YAML. So let's do inventory -YAML. And this, I'm going to have to think a little bit because I typically write these in ini. So we start with all. All right. And all, I believe we need to have children, then hosts, and now we can start doing our inventory items. So I may be wrong about the children there for all. We might just go straight all and hosts, but we'll see. So we'll do lab rel an01. Now here's a gotcha. It probably is not a gotcha. It's probably just this is how it is, but you would think this is like a list, you know, an actual list in YAML where you would have your little dash and such. This might be considered a list. I don't think so, but I know that when I have done some practice with this in the past, I have forgotten that even the individual hosts are basically going to have the indentation with the spaces, and will end with the colon and do not have the little tack symbol for list. So just keep that in mind. If you have written an inventory file and you can't figure out what's going on, that might be what's up. All right, so let's save this and let's do Ansible playbook, not playbook, Ansible inventory -- graph I inventory -YAML. Let's see if it reads it properly. Didn't quite read the way I expected it to. And I think the issue is that children. So let's do that, and we'll eliminate 2 spaces for all of these. That looks better. Okay, so then you have to do children to create your groups. I believe that is how that's going to work. Now, of course, I can reference that documentation as well. But again, part of your practice, and I encourage you to do this with your own practice, is see if you can get through something without having to immediately go to the documentation. That'll be kind of a good test of your working knowledge for it. Now, I think with this, I'm doing pretty well with the inventory, and I would feel confident taking the exam now. But I'll still do some practice with this. It's important to know where the documentation is, but know that if you're having to rely on it for every single thing that you do, then you might not have enough time to get through your exam. So we'll go back into our YAML inventory and let's make a couple of groups. So now we'll do children, and let's try web servers, and web servers would have hosts, and let's try just putting, almost forgot that colon there. AN01 in that. Let's see if that is interpreted correctly. Yep, and it is. Now, let's see if the shorthand works for this. I'm not sure if the little shorthand for numbers will work with a YAML inventory. So 1:4. I think since there's a colon in there, that's probably not going to work. No, it did. Excellent. All right, so you can use the shorthand for that. And so just proof positive. Let's just put 1 and 2 into the web servers. Not 22, just 2. Which, I mean, you could put 22 there. The problem is, let's say that you run something against your web servers, and once it can't resolve those host names anymore, obviously that'll fail. So let's see. Yep, ungroup 3 and 4, and then web servers 1 and 2. Let's do this. VI inventory. Nope. I want the YAML one. Let's do a couple more children. Let's see if we can replicate sort of what we had with the INI file. So DB servers, hosts, and we'll put labrel AN03 into that. And now we'll do prod servers. And now prod servers have children. And let's see, I don't think we're going to have to do hosts for this. Let's just see if this will do what we want. And again, I can refer to documentation as I do this, but sometimes I've found when you experiment and things work, you sometimes will remember it more. All right, so Ansible inventory. Let's see, so the only thing that's ungrouped should be 4. That makes sense. It looks like the prod has its children, database servers is there, web server there. So yeah, so that worked out well. Now, I haven't done anything with any type of variables with inventory. You can set some variables to where, labrel AN03, you would use a particular port for SSH and all that kind of stuff. The reason why I'm not doing that is because that is considered deprecated with Ansible, and you should be using like host vars and group vars and such with that. So when we get to the objective on variables, I'll go over that a bit more, but that's why I'm leaving that out of inventories. So the takeaway for this particular practice session for me is the fact that, you have your default inventory file that's within etc Ansible hosts, or within etc Ansible, and the file is hosts, that has a good bit of documentation within it. So if you get stuck with the exam, you'll be able to use that. And depending on which configuration file you are reading for working with Ansible, either the default configuration or some other configuration file, you can dictate which inventory file to check. And you can also specify the inventory file for an ad hoc command or playbook. You can do Ansible playbook -I in your inventory. there is one other thing I wanted to test before I end the video, and that is using a directory. Now, I've seen that with the Fedora project. When I've looked at some of their stuff, they were using inventory directories. And so the idea behind this is you can point the inventory to a directory and it'll read your files in it. So let's put that to the test here. Let's make a directory. Let's call it INV, and we'll cd into INV. Let's make 2 inventory files. We'll actually do one in INI format. Then we'll do one in YAML. So INI, I'm just going to add 2 hosts, or I'll just do a single host here. Start with something easy. And then YAML, we'll do all hosts labrel AN02. All right, so now let's see what happens here if I do Ansible Inventory graph and we'll just say the inventory directory. Okay, so it looks like it read both files. And let's go into the inventories for these. We'll go into the INI one, and let's do web servers. And we'll do labrel AN02. Let's go into the YAML one, and we will add children, DB servers, hosts, labrel AN03. All right, so now let's clear our screen. We'll rerun the Ansible inventory command, and we'll tell it to look in the inventory directory. All right, so it read the groups. So now I'm curious to see what happens if we have a conflict. So let's go to the YAML file, and let's add a web servers group hosts, and we'll put AN04 into this. All right, so let's run our command again. Let's see what happens. Okay, so it combines what you have there. So that's good to know. So rather than overriding what one inventory had for the other, it just combines it. I can see where that could potentially be dangerous, as far as you'd have to be careful that you truly intend for those to be combined, right? So I think it's probably true with a lot of things. If you're combining configuration files and such together, you have to be careful about what you're doing. So I think I've exhausted everything that I would probably need to know concerning inventories, specifically with Ansible. As always, I want to thank you for taking the time to watch, and I hope this video was helpful for you with your own studies. Again, it's not intended to be a tutorial, but hopefully some of the things that I talked about and how I found documentation and such, you might find useful for your own studying as well. I want to thank returning subscribers for watching another video, and want to remind everyone once again, if you haven't subscribed yet, to click that subscribe button. Also, don't forget to like the video and share it with others. And again, feel free to leave comments as well. Thanks again for taking the time to watch, and I'll see you the next time.